Hello, it's another week, and as usual, that means another devlog. So this week we're going to cover everything we did from localization to content creator research, on top of consistent marketing, and generally where we are with the game. Spoiler alert, pretty much there. So a few different things happened this week. A lot of time was spent on gathering information on content creators. Now, as far as we can tell, unless you have a marketing budget and you're willing to pay for advertisement of your game, whether that's on Reddit, TV if anyone still does that, or certain social media or websites, chances are you are going to be looking at social media, free social media, whether that's content you create yourself or other content creators that you try and enlist to support you. And again, in certain cases, depending on their number of followers, it might be a case that they want you to pay for that as well. We at Banana Jam Games have not got a budget for marketing. Why? Because we barely have a budget for ourselves. So what this means is that we have to get creative with marketing. Whilst I did just say that we don't have a budget at all, we did try running a Reddit ad for around $7.99 and it had little returns. The problem is that Reddit will charge you depending on either how many impressions it gives you or however many click-throughs you get. Now the problem is with that is that yes, we may get 300 click-throughs, but again, not all of those will convert into wish lists. And as such, if you whittle it down enough, chances are you are paying more than you're going to get in return, even if that wish list does turn into a sale. So let's say you pay £7 for 300 click-throughs and only 100 of those click-throughs, and that's being generous, turn into wish lists, and then only 20% of those wish lists on the week of release turn into sales. Then take out Steam's 30% fee for platforming your game, and it doesn't end up being that profitable an idea to use that marketing service. Now, as you know, we have a YouTube that we use to market, which does better in some respects than others, but we also have a TikTok and a Reddit, and we've recently started with Instagram too. As far as we can tell, there is no one social media that is better for gaming, except for potentially YouTube. And even then, there's no guarantee that your game is going to spiral out of control on there, as it's mainly been used for gameplay, and this is more led by the personalities that people want to follow and watch instead. So on YouTube, we have these devlogs, which can occasionally be really useful to certain people, depending on the topic, but we also have the shorts that we've been uploading. This is your vertical, bone-oriented content, and whilst the views can't always be guaranteed as actually being effective, as some of them are people swiping through and then swiping straight off, these are generally doing much better than our longer form content. And similarly on TikTok and Instagram, we see the same sort of trend, albeit Instagram potentially being harder to get the initial gas going. What we have done more recently is use certain trends to reach a wider audience. As you may have seen if you do watch some of our shorts, I like to show different games that I play Strange Shoals over, often because I think it would be helpful for people to see in what scenarios they could play Strange Shoals that it would actually be usable. I'm not saying that playing Call of Duty 6v6 hardcore team deathmatch is going to be the right place to play Strange Shoals. You can respawn instantly and there is basically no gap in gameplay. You are going 100 miles an hour the entire time you're in a game. And while you could technically play it in the pre-lobby servers, because of how popular Call of Duty is, you're not usually in these servers for too long anyway. Then you also have to factor in that almost every corner of the screen is important in the game as a HUD. So that's fine. Maybe Call of Duty is not the best place to play Strange Shores, and maybe the market and customer base for Call of Duty players isn't the type of people that we're going to get with Strange Shores. But that's not to say that certain games aren't perfect for it. Hearthstone is understandably a turn-based card game. You take your turn, the enemy takes their turn, and there's a bit of a gap in gameplay. You've got some time to sit there and do something else. And if I'm being honest, I've often taken my eyes off the screen and looked at my phone, which has not really been helpful because then I've had no idea what the player has just done, what spells they've just played, what minions they've put down, and what the effects are. And this eats into my time as I'm going back and trying to check all of this that happened. So what better way to have something on your screen that takes your attention so that you can still passively see what's going on with the actual game that you're meant to be playing. More recently, I decided to jump on certain trends within the gaming industry when it comes to algorithms and social media, and we've seen a fairly decent outcome from doing that. Half Sword is extremely popular on various social medias, with half of the content creators I watch having played it already. So I made a TikTok short, reel, whatever you want to call it, with Strange Shoals over Half Sword. And more recently, the world has potentially been set on fire by the news that an Oblivion remaster was in the works. And then, sure as shit, there was a remaster. So again, I thought this might be something that ends up all over everyone's feed. And if all of your content creators that you're watching who are going to be gamers are sharing different Oblivion media, that Oblivion will be put in as a tag. And if you're watching that, it's going to be a tag that your algorithm realizes you may be like. So at which point I made a few different TikToks playing Oblivion and put the relevant tag on it. And whilst none of the videos have gone viral necessarily, they've had far more uptake and interaction than any of the other ones have before in a certain amount of time. So all of this marketing stuff is great. It does build an audience, however slowly that may be, of people that actually want to watch your content and put up with my voice. However, again, this doesn't necessarily convert into wish lists. And whilst we've had a steady income of wish lists over the past 2 weeks, finally reaching 2,000, nothing beats the initial influx we had of 1,400 when 2 articles about our game were published from a Taiwanese and Japanese gaming news article. So these are the things that we've done for marketing so far. And whilst we continue to work on these different little shorts that I think hopefully one day might blow up, we also diverted a large amount of our attention to researching content creators. Now again, as I said, we don't have a budget here at Banana Jam Games, and so unfortunately we can't pay any of these content creators. But nevertheless, we thought it was a good idea to start getting all of the names together, at least anyway. Having a varied list of different creators, either who play games that, as I've previously mentioned, it would be good to play Strange Shores at the same time as, or people that are more into the cozy aesthetic. Even some people who regularly do just chat-in streams, so that they can still have something engaging on their screen if they wanted to. I also found on the internet multiple sources saying that essentially you want to spend almost a month getting these different content creators, because in the end they end up being one of the single-handedly most important marketing avenues for your game. And I can't say I disagree. Most of the games that I've ever found an interest for, I found by watching content creators. I don't necessarily watch TV, I'm not looking for adverts, and when I come home I game. Yes, I have 2 monitors, and on the other monitor I don't usually scroll through websites or troll through Reddit. I'll put a content creator on there, and I'll watch as they explore all the different features and get an honest opinion of the game from somebody that I've watched for years, as opposed to a carefully constructed description of the game from the developers who are actively, obviously, trying to sell it to you, and in some cases may do it with a hint of bullshit. So we started putting together a list that had the name of the creator, the URL to their channel, what language they were in, their follow account, and then also their email, as well as finally what different types of games they played. And all of this is really useful information. We can track who is more or less likely to play our game, and we've got the URLs so we can always go back and check, so that if they don't notify us that they've made content on our game, we can still thank them personally for doing it, and hopefully foster a relationship between a content creator and a developer that can be used for future games. One of the last things that we also put on this spreadsheet was the language that these streamers or YouTubers speak in. I've done a bit of research, and it turns out that a lot of people from a lot of different countries will put up with the fact that most games are in English and don't necessarily have localization. And whilst I will get onto what we have done for localization, we can't guarantee that we'll be able to localize for every language on release. But seeming as most people don't necessarily care, there's no point limiting yourself to a Western audience using Western content creators, when there's still thousands from different countries that you could also use to market your game in other countries. And given that we know there's definitely an interest from Taiwan and Japan, why wouldn't there be interest from other countries? If your game's already limited in terms of the tone and the style that it caters to, you may as well open the market up to people from all around the globe. Give yourself the best chance of getting some numbers playing your game. So as you may or may not know, the Steam page is already localized for certain languages, and we also decided that we should try and localize for as many languages in future as possible. Currently there are some languages that are localized in the game, and James did this by making it so that the language can be set in the game data from the earliest moment. The game takes this and then also selects from manually inputted options cater to the audience that is playing the game. As for the fish names, text is translated by a Google Translate API, and this was so that every single item didn't have to be translated. And that's where we're currently at with marketing and translating. But what comes next? We also did a few different polishings with some outside support, redoing the buttons for the game, making them look a little bit more stylized, and we also finally added the background changes. Strange Shores is now entirely feature complete, with you able to pick whichever background you'd like to fish at, depending on if you've caught the required fish or object, and you can also do this with up to 3 of your friends, inputting your own name and creating your own server. So with all of that being done, what's next? Well, as it just so happens, we have already pushed on with the next steps. We had a deadline for when we wanted to release the game, and we are currently still on track for it as far as we're aware. So The next step, which we have, again, already done, is to set up a playtest. And if you go to our Steam page right now, you can access that playtest. The only feature we've not included for the playtest is the changing of the backgrounds. We've done this because we didn't want people to essentially have the full game before launch. Some might call that a bit backhanded, but we would argue that it's more to make sure that people are enticed and want to come back and play the game. It would be really helpful if you wanted to playtest with/for us, as we want to stress test the multiplayer as much as we possibly can, getting a good understanding of the numbers of people that would want to play our game and the behaviours of how they play it, whether they're sat there for 6 hours at a time or maybe just for half an hour, would be really helpful in future-proofing our game, making sure that we can run it for as long as needed. So links to that will be down in the description below, and if you find any errors or bugs or have any design ideas that you'd really like to let us know, by all means join us in the Discord, as there will be a button in the Strange Shores playtest that will lead you straight to it. We would really appreciate your feedback on this game, and whilst we've already started putting together a post-launch timeline, we would also like feedback on that once we do release, so that we can build a game that everybody in the community feels like they've taken a part to construct, as well as to build a game that does appeal to everybody in its best sense. That, however, is pretty much it. The devlogs going forward may be a bit more short, a bit more concise, or they may have nothing at all to say in them. It'll be a lot of boring business end work and a few more of the business as usual jobs like making more fish and artwork and more background. If you want to keep in contact with us, however, throughout the entire build up to the release of Strange Shores, again, you can find us in Discord and we're always happy to chat. However, for this week, that's everything. Happy fishing.